Hey, everybody. It is I, your instructor, Beverly. I hope you can hear me okay. I'm having some trouble once again with these headphones. They don't work so well. But anyway, this is chapter 6 in our building construction textbook. And it's on fire protection systems. This book is, you get your money's worth when it comes to PowerPoints. There's 110 slides for this particular chapter. I am going to assume that some of those, I haven't looked at them all, but I am going to assume that some of those are pictures. At least I'm hoping that they are. And so I decided not to narrate that. But you're going to have a whole class. There's a whole class that we have in the program on fire protection systems. And so I don't want to get too bogged down in it. I'm just going to overview. But there's some terminology again that we want to make sure we're on the same page about, and also understand how it fits with building construction. So I have my notes, I got my book. So if I seem a little disjointed, like I say, I hope you can hear this okay. I'm going to check and make sure in just a minute. As we know, as throughout history, we don't really have a lot of the true conflagrations anymore. Now, wildfires aside, not really a part of that, but we don't really have the Bostons or the Baltimores or the Chicago fires, that burned down a whole city block or a neighborhood. And so containment has always been one of our issues, and that's what a lot of these fire protection systems do, is to try to contain those fires. The other thing that fire protection systems can do is to provide for egress for the occupants. That's another piece that's been very important, is the occupant safety. And also, as time has gone on, we recognize that these systems are also in place as it relates to firefighter safety. So there's a lot of codes and whatever that your book references a specific chapter in the International Building Code that's dedicated to firefighter safety. So a lot of these things are newer as we recognize that these things can be prevented. One of the things that your book brings out is the whole concept of terminology. And again, we've talked about that before in this class, is making sure that we're talking the same thing when we're talking. That the term fireproof, I hope you know that nothing is fireproof. We saw that with the Weinkauf Hotel, it was fireproof. We saw that, the Titanic was sinkable proof. And so there's nothing that's fireproof. When we talk about flame proof, think about your turnout gear, that it will hold a flame, but it will not burn. Self-extinguishing, the whole concept of flame retardant, fire resistant, all of those things kind of come into the terminology of building construction. But nothing is fireproof, okay? Nothing. I don't believe. Even when I was reading here, it talked about, concrete block buildings. They may not burn, but they fail. And I think that that's the concept that we need to understand. And while part of it may be fireproof or flameproof, as in a building and the way it's constructed, that the furnishings, the contents of that building most likely are going to burn. And so that's where we have to think about it and remember that. Fire resistant. Again, fire resistance of columns means they're resisting collapse. Fire resistance of floors is concerned again about collapse and the passage of fire from one floor to another. So it doesn't, again, mean that they won't burn. And then, of course, fire doors is concerned with the passage of fire. When we talk about a fire rated whatever, wall, sheetrock, door, it is usually, it's a time period, a 2-hour fire rated door. That means it is supposed to, is the length of time for which it remains structurally stable or resist the passage of fire. So make sure that you're up to date on all those terms. There's a lot of testing that goes on. We've talked about NIST, the National Institute of Science and Technology. UL, Underwriter Laboratories, does a lot of testing as well to determine the fire rating of particular products, where these fire ratings will come from, and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of information in this chapter about the whole concept of testing and rating materials. And I'm going to see if I can find some articles to supplement a little bit of this. The Steiner tunnel test is one that I've heard a lot about. I actually have had the opportunity to go to Underwriter's Laboratory on a tour, and I didn't go. Mainly, it was to view this particular test. It's a very well-known test at Underwriter Laboratory, and it helps to classify flame spread. There's the tunnel test. There's a smoke developed there, how much smoke is developed from it. Another test that the book mentions is a radiant panel test. There's FM, factory mutual, which is FM. They're very similar to Underwriter Laboratory, but they also insure. FM approvals corner test. And then there's, of course, carpeting test. Flame retardancy of carpeting and furnishings and a lot of that thing. So, we should never try to conduct our own tests because I don't know about you, but I'm not a scientist. And so I don't really know how those things will go. And at this, when we use the ratings of these testing laboratories, it's a nationwide international type of test that is done. So when we look at the research, it's really important that we think about that. But look at these terms and make sure they're all squared away in your head. Another issue is the containment of fire and smoke, and usually this has to do with containment, like we talked about at the beginning. It has to do with spread and also with egress of any occupants of the building. Firewalls are typically 2 to 4 hour rated. And again, this is part of the fire protection features. A lot of time we think about fire protection as sprinklers and standpipes, but the construction of the building itself helps to define its fire protection needs, and it's what I'm trying to come up with the right words here about how it's classified as far as its fire protection features. There may be fire barriers, fire dampers, smoke barriers. Again, make sure that you know the difference in those things. Sometimes people try to use them interchangeably. Our fire doors, they can be a swinging fire door, it can be a sliding fire door. That's different than a fire rated door. Our fire doors are on the exits, if you've ever flown on a plane, that is part of the fire exit, the emergency exit. That's the fire door. And they can be swinging, they can be rolling, they can be sliding, they can have self-closing devices on them, which is probably a pretty important thing. Let's see, as we're going through here, it talks about stairwells, it talks about horizontal exits and smoke barriers. Again, I want you to read all of this. I'm not lecturing on all of it. Run through those PowerPoints. Take the time to go through this. It'll help you when your class comes along, and you also need to know it for your test as well. One of the things that we've talked about, and I think we did it in this class, was the whole concept of defending in place and having safe places within a building. You need to know about those. And the whole concept of smoke and compartmentation. Many times when we look at hospitals or schools, they're built on that compartmentation theory that You know, you've got your major fire doors and then you just rooms, and the more you can block off, the less the smoke is going to travel and less the fire is going to travel as well. Fire protection systems, of course, the first one that comes to our mind is our sprinkler systems. And there's different kinds. There's the wet pipe, the dry pipe, the pre-action, the deluge. And it seems like there was one more that's not mentioned here, and I can't remember what it is. But if it's not mentioned here, then we're not going to worry about it. Um, there's a lot of opposition to sprinklers in residential settings. Those are not the same systems as a commercial type system, but the value cannot be underestimated of a residential sprinkler. You know, there's a lot, sometimes there's trade-offs that can be made in construction. If you sprinkler a building, a commercial structure, it may lessen the number of fire exits that you have to have, or it might lessen the number of fire extinguishers that you're supposed to have, that kind of thing. But there is a lot of opposition to sprinklers, mainly in the home building field. And I hope that one day we are able to come to terms with that, because not only do sprinklers contain a fire, minimize damage, they save lives. They save occupants' lives and they save firefighter lives. So if that sprinkler is not allowing a room to reach flashover, when we get there, we are so much safer. So sprinklers they have so much value. Don't ever think that they're going to put us out of business, because they're not. Home builders don't like them because it raises the cost of the home or lessens their profit. Funny conversation, and I may have told y'all this before, so I'm sorry, that my mother bought a new home several years ago, probably about 6 or 7 years ago now. And I asked if it had sprinklers, and I asked it like that. And the lady said, the agent said, it has sprinklers, but we can't use them right now because there's a water ban. And she thought I was talking about lawn sprinklers. And I said, no, ma'am, I'm talking about residential fire sprinklers. And another agent piped up and said, do you know how much that adds to the cost of a home? And I said, yeah. Do you know how much I love my mother? And I truly meant that. I wasn't trying to be sassy, and he didn't really have a reply. And that one of the agents was talking about, you know, all the electrical was in this conduit and blah, blah, blah. And I said, you know, I get all that. I said, but when my mama walks away from the stove and forgets that she's cooking, I want to know that something's going to happen to help her. And so a lot of times sprinklers do get that bad rap. As a matter of fact, there's some misconceptions in your book on page 164 about, you know, that the sprinkler system will discharge on even a trifling fire. We all know that sprinkler heads discharge based on heat, not on smoke. And so it has to be more than trifling, depending upon the temperature that the sprinkler head is designed for. The entire building will drown. You know, the old, in the movies, one goes off, they all go off. That's so false. Only those in the area of the fire. Most fires, I think that it's like 85% are controlled by 2 sprinkler heads or less. So that tells you something right there. Some people say that the water does more damage than the fire. Well, we know that's not true. Actually, the water from fire hoses probably does more damage than the sprinkler. People are worried about the pipes that leak. Well, you got to have plumbing and, you know, plumbing around anyway. Do you worry about, you know, the pipes for your bathroom leaking? Maybe, but the sprinklers are different. It says smoke is the big killer, so smoke detectors are better than sprinklers, and that's not even comparing apples and apples. You the smoke, all that smoke alarm does is warn you. It activates by smoke and warns you. It doesn't do anything to get rid of the smoke. People say, the fire department is just down the block. We all know the fallacy of that. I like this one. Sprinklers cause damage to libraries. Well, you know what? So does fire. Smoke detectors set off the sprinklers. I don't know why somebody would think that. But there's an awful lot of misconceptions in the fire service, that we think that because a building is sprinklered, it's not going to burn. It's no problem. Well, yeah, it still is a problem. What about supplying the sprinkler system at the fire department connection? What's your SOP on that? Do you wait and see what happens before you supply it, or are you ready and hooked up, ready to go to supply that sprinkler system? What do you pump the sprinkler system at? Again, SOPs, different buildings. Your book references the 1991 fire in the Meridian, the One Meridian Plaza building in Philadelphia. It says it was stopped by 7 sprinklers on the 30th floor. And if you've ever seen the videos of that, it's a pretty huge fire. It was estimated that the discharge from these sprinklers was 3 to 4 times the normal amount. Due to the pressure supplied by the fire department, it is possible the sprinklers could have stopped the fierce fire attack if they were operated only at normal pressure. So we know that through the fire departments, they connected to the sprinkler system and they pumped that sprinkler system, giving it even more water, and they were contained. So, and what it's saying is that it could have possibly contained it anyway without that, but they were there and prepared. So we want to shut the sprinklers down as soon as possible. As soon as we get there to prevent excessive water damage. That's not always the right thing to do. We want to make sure that all the fire is out before we do that. Residential sprinklers are not the same as commercial ones. There may be places in the home because of the lack of combustibility or flammability, or the chances of a fire starting in that area are not covered. And so it's some people refer to it as partial sprinkler system coverage. I'm looking to see. There is on page 168 in your book. There's a kind of there's a bulleted list about where sprinklers worked or where they didn't work. So we want to make sure that we support the sprinkler system on a fire. We also need to understand it's there for a purpose. It's not taking away our fun, but it could possibly be saving our lives. So make sure that you know what your fire department policy is. Again, it goes back to pre-fire planning, pre-fire investigation of where the FDC, the fire department connection, is located. Talking to the building maintenance person about the sprinkler system and its use, and making sure that you look outside the building for the post indicator valve. Is it open? Is it closed? The OS and Y, if there is one or the other, is it opened? Making sure that the fire department connection is cleared. There's been lots of pictures where the caps are gone and there's rocks in there, or I've even heard stories about people having their dope stashed in there. So you have to kind of be a little bit careful about that. Where is the sprinkler shut off? All of those things about sprinkler system. So sprinkler system is kind of a big deal when we're looking at fire protection systems as it relates to building construction. Of course, standpipe systems are another part of that. There's class 1, class 2, and class 3. You want to make sure that you're familiar with the difference in those particular systems and what they supply. The class 1 is a 2.5 hose connections that supply water for use by the fire department and those trained in handling heavy fire streams. Class 2 is 1.5 inches. Yeah, that's 1.5 inches. Usually used by the building occupants. We may not really use that. And then class 3 provides 1.5 inches hose stations to supply water for use by building occupants, and a 2.5 hose connection to supply that larger volume of water. So So make sure you know the difference in the class 1, class 2, class 3 standpipe systems. Again, there's different types of operations. Make sure you know what your SOP, your department's SOP, and make sure you know the buildings in your first due that have those. Fire alarm and detection and communication systems. There's initiating devices, fire alarms, duct smoke detectors, spot type heat detectors, flame detectors, water flow switches. So we're not just talking about an audible alarm. The audible alarm is there for the occupants of the building. These others are to notify a fire as well. It's real important that we educate the occupants about the use of those. Smoke management systems is another thing, and I learned a lot about these. I had the chance to participate in an update. It says fire detection and protection systems. No, fire detection and something. I can't remember the name of the book. Fire detection and suppression systems. That's what it was. And so I learned a lot about smoke management systems. I didn't really know that much before. But these can be your stairwell pressurization systems, that your fire stairs, your stairwells. It's one reason it's important to keep the stairwell doors closed, is that it could be pressurized, so it kind of keeps moving the smoke away so that it doesn't seep under the doors and that kind of thing. There may be smoke control systems zoned where you could turn off, maybe a combination of pressurization and venting is what it is in certain areas of, whether it's the floor above, the floor below. There may be times when you need to, where the HVAC system can become that smoke removal system. All of these things it's really important that, again, we are familiar with this in our commercial construction so that we know the questions to ask when we do our pre-fire planning, when we're watching a building being built, or if we're invited to observe some sort of test of this system so that we know those kinds of things. Some other fire protection systems are your other extinguishing systems other than the sprinkler with water. You may have dry chemical, wet chemical, foam, carbon dioxide systems, clean agents such as halon, or those other systems, water mist systems, and water spray systems. And there could even be areas where there uses a deluge system and it's total flooding. So again, this goes back to how the building is built. And you may say, this is like a whole different class. And yes, it is. Like I said, we're going to have a class on all of this. But I encourage you to go through those PowerPoints, look at these things. If you live in an area where you may not have a lot of high-rise building or a lot of commercial structures, or maybe they're older, and so they don't have a lot of these features, pictures that are in the text and maybe in our slides are invaluable at illustrating to us what these things are. And again, it goes back to, we need to know what's inside this building. We need to know how it was built, what features are protecting it, what I want to call it inherent fire protection. And to me, when I say that term, I am referring to in the structure itself, as in floors, walls, doors, ceilings, that kind of thing, furnishings, what is inherent in those things that help us be a fire safe or fire safer building. And then the systems that I think about, the sprinkler, the standpipe, the extinguishment systems, even your fire doors, your stairwells, and that kind of thing. All of these things work together to create this atmosphere of safety. It is not it's not a fail-safe type of a thing. It's, as we know, I've watched them burn to the ground. You have too, maybe. I worked we had a large cotton manufacturing. It was a carpet manufacturing, an old carpet mill that was then now carpet manufacturing, and it flat burned to the ground. And as we began to see, like, their fire doors didn't automatically close like they were supposed to. They had roll down doors and they got stuck, or nobody closed them, and it allowed the fire to spread. So all these things that are here that we're looking at are built into the system, but they're not people proof, and people can do as much damage and as much harm to these systems as anything else. So so we want to make sure that we're familiar with the way it should be, so that when we do pre-fire planning, we see the way it is. And if there's a large difference, we can ask the questions of why is it this way. So run through those slides. Like I say, I know there's a lot. Actually, I'm not even going to, I may try to find some pictures of like the Steiner tunnel test and that kind of thing, and I'll put them on the course site, but I'm not going to give you another assignment. I think your midterm exam is coming up, and there's a lot in this chapter that I want you to know. So we're just going to let it slide at that. So if you have any questions, be sure and let me know. Enjoy your reading. Thanks. Bye.